Hey everyone, it's Spike, and something a little different today. It's finally happened. I have gone solo in my flight training. And this is what this video is going to be, a half hour of me flying all by myself. So, what is going to happen here is that what I am supposed to do is to take off and land the plane 3 times. As you can see, after taking a few practice laps around the airport, my instructor is about to leave the aircraft and will leave the controls to me. Today, we are flying in a Cessna 172, which is the most popular plane in the world. There's tens of thousands of these planes used in general aviation, and for good reason. It is a very forgiving airplane. It is used a lot in flight training. So my instructor closes the door and I will be off and running. Now at this airport there's only one runway and only one taxiway leading to it. The weather is a slight crosswind. It will be taken off on runway 23. Now if you're not familiar with aviation, we do our directions in degrees. So if you look at a compass, you'll notice that there's numbers. East is 90 degrees, south is 180, west is 270, and north is 360. Now, runway 23 is pointed to 230 degrees, which is pretty much to the southwest. So after checking traffic and making sure that there's nobody taking off or landing, I backtrack onto runway 23. Because like I said, there's only one runway, and in order to take off on this runway, you have to go on there and taxi all the way back on the runway. Now, as this is going on, there is one aircraft that's also doing laps around the airport. So as long as I keep my distance from him, everything will be fine. So, for the first part, I'll be explaining each leg of the flight. I'll interject at one point, but otherwise, the rest I'll just leave you to watch the rest. So, as I approach the end of the runway, I have to do my before takeoff checklist, which is to make sure that the flaps are in the correct setting, which in this case the flaps should be all the way up at 0 degrees. Carpet is in, the takeoff configuration set on the trim wheel, and we've already checked the brakes. Note the time, and then we will be set for takeoff. So now we start to turn around the plane. I make my radio call to air, well, it's actually the CTAF, which is the Common Traffic Air Frequency, which is to communicate with all the airplanes that are nearby in the area. There is no tower at this airport, so it's just us and the pilots talking to each other. So we are taking off now in our first takeoff solo. Again, I'm in a slight crosswind, so I have to use a little bit of rudder to keep the airplane along the runway heading. So I have to keep it to a southwest heading. Now, when we're doing laps in the pattern, as we call it, we have to be 1,000 feet above the elevation of the airport. This airport is marked at 163 feet. And so that we round it up to the nearest 100, so the traffic pattern altitude is 1,200 feet. So that's where we're going to be flying at. But this is our upwind leg, which we will be climbing. And once I reach 900 feet, I will make my first left-hand turn, which will be the crosswind leg, which will only take about between 20-30 seconds to fly. That's usually where I finish up with my climb. So yeah, here comes the crosswind turn now towards the left. notice a bit of turbulence there. Yeah, that's what happens when you have a bit of a crosswind. So now we're on the crosswind leg. And as I approach 1,200 feet, I'm going to pull the throttle. Now, again, if you're not a pilot, you think that you use the elevator to climb. And while that is somewhat true, it's mostly the throttle that does the altitude for you. If you want to climb, you push the throttle all the way in. If you want to go down, you pull the throttle out. And yes, you will need to use elevator, but you'll mostly be using the trim for your cruising altitude. So here is the downwind leg. So the downwind is when we're flying in the opposite direction of the runway. So I am at a heading of 050, which is to the northeast, complete opposite direction of the runway. And we're staying at 1,200 feet. So yeah, this is the easiest part. Just keep the airplane straight, and as you can see, some turbulence, which with lighter aircraft it is more susceptible to it. And at this point, the aircraft ahead of me is now having his turn at the runway. I have to keep my visual separation from him, but at this point it's no issue. Now what I am doing as I'm looking out to my left side is looking for the threshold of the runway. At this point I am pulling the carb heat, which will reduce a little bit of the engine power. And I also pull out the throttle and set the flaps to 10 degrees. This will help slow down the plane and also give it a little bit of lift. And at this point, I start my descent. I look at it a couple times. I'm going to judge my base turn, which the base turn is the second to last turn before you head to the runway. Now as I go into the base turn, I'll be setting the flaps to 20, which is the normal configuration for the Cessna 172. And I am aiming to fly at 65 knots, which is the optimum speed for landing. So now I'm going to be judging my turn on final. So the final is the leg where you make your last turn and you're going to make your descent onto the runway. And of course I'm flying visual flight rules, as all student pilots do. You use your sight to judge where you are. And this airport does have a VASI. Sometimes it's on, sometimes it's off. But it's something you really... It's not necessary as long as you can judge your altitude, your glide slope along with the runway. So now we're going to approach the threshold. And you'll see me flare, and my goal is to hold the plane up above the runway as long as I can. You'll probably hear a squealing noise as I come down. Yeah, you heard the tires squealing, but if you've heard that little, the squeal before the tires, that's the stall horn. Which is meant to warn you if your speed is too low, but since we're landing, that's normal. So then we reset our configuration and take off again, and the process will repeat 2 more times. So I'm going to let you enjoy the next lap, but I'm going to interject in just a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, enjoy this lap of the flight. Alright, coming back in again as we go on this turn for our landing on lap number 2. Now, there's something I want you to judge here. Now, here's our final. Now, in this lap, I'm going to end up doing a go-around. And the reason is because that my approach was too high. I was not going to make that landing. And if you compare this with the first lap, you'll definitely see why I'm too high. Yeah, it comes with experience on how you judge it. And I did have the throttle all the way out. I tried to, but I can't do that and hold a speed of 65 knots at the same time. So I figured the best thing to do was just to go back around and try it again. So at this point, my decision is it's better for me to go around, try again. So I put the carb heat in, put the throttle all the way in, and then one notch of flaps up, build up some speeds, and then when I get enough speed, put the flaps all the way back up. And it's okay to do that. You can go around if you feel like that you're not going to be able to make that landing. It's better to go around than try to salvage a bad landing. So all this will really mean is that I'm just going to have to start this lap all over again, but that's okay. So now I know what I have to do, and I will set up the configuration again, but first I have to complete my upwind, crosswind, and downwind legs all over again. But hey, that means more time in the logbook. So that's pretty much, I just wanted to explain that. But the next 2 landings will be clean, and you'll see my excitement at the end when I get back over to the gas pump. So enjoy the remainder of this flight, and hopefully I'll be in the skies with all of you very soon.